encourage us, we pray, in our struggle for justice, love, and peace. We make our prayer through Christ our Lord. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Father John Germain. Father John Germain is from Secam. We really appreciate that you've started us off with a word of prayer. Once again, thank you so much for creating time to participate in this press conference. We have a very interesting program lined up for you today. We have about 70 registrants, but about 47 people have joined, and we are hoping more will join. They are drawn from media and civil society. And so the purpose of this press conference is basically to communicate a joint message from a series of 5 African climate dialogues. The first one that we did was on 19th July on false solutions and the Congo Basin. It was followed by a dialogue on food systems, agriculture, and adaptation. We also had a dialogue on climate finance. This was sometime in August. And then in September, we had 2 dialogues. The first one was on loss and damage, and another one was on climate-induced migration and displacement. And so as I told you, we have a very interesting panel and program lined up for you. We are really honored because we will start by a presentation of the communique by His Eminence Fridolin Besungu Cardinal Labongo. He is the first Vice President of SECAM and the Archbishop of Kinshasa. He has been the Archbishop of Kinshasa since his appointment on 1st November 2018. He is also a professed member of the Order of the Friars Minor Capuchin, and Pope Francis raised him to the rank of Cardinal on 5th October 2019. Welcome, Your Eminence. And then after the presentation, a panel of experts will respond to the communique. So starting us off will be Mr. Ephraim Shitima. He is from the Republic of Zambia, and he's the current chair of the Africa Group of Negotiators. He's an expert on climate change policy formulation and implementation, and an experienced negotiator under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And then after Mr. Ephraim Shitima, we will have an intervention by Tasneem Esop. She's the current executive director of Climate Action Network International. She is born in South Africa and based there, and has significant experience in the climate movement and has held various senior government positions in South Africa. And then our third respondent will be Ineza Umuhoza Grace. She's the director of the Loss and Damage Youth Coalition and negotiator with the government of Rwanda. She's the founder of the youth-led Rwanda nonprofit, the Green Protector, where she's an executive officer and co-founder of the Loss and Damage Youth Coalition. She serves as coordinator. She's an African ecofeminist, and she believes in the sustainability of the ecosystem and in the power of women to lead the change. I agree with Ineza on that. And so my name is Lucy Espila. I'm Kenyan. I'm based in Kenya, but I work for Caritas Africa, and I'm currently calling from Togo, where Caritas Africa is headquartered. I will be the moderator for this online event. And distinguished guests, this is an initiative of the church and civil society actors, as well as allies, including communities and religious leaders from across the African continent and European organizations. And we recognize that climate change is a lived reality in the global context today. The change has caused significant social and economic losses. Pope Francis, in paragraph 25 of Laudato Si, observes that, and I quote, environment, social, economic, political, and the distribution of goods has been affected by climate change. And climate change also represents one of the principal challenges facing humanity in our day. Its worst impact will probably be felt by developing countries in the coming decades. And this was written back in 2015. And Pope Francis continues to observe that many of the poor live in areas particularly affected by a phenomena related to warming, and their means of subsistence are largely dependent on natural reserved and ecosystemic services, such as agriculture, fishing, and forestry. And this is where we draw our inspiration for the dialogue and the different engagements that we've had in the lead up to this press conference. And we agree that the situation is worrying, and this is why it is important for us to continue with this policy dialogue. We recognize the important role of the media in the climate change discourse, and we welcome your observations, questions, and follow-up actions. This press conference will be recorded and live streamed. And thank you so much for joining. I see now we are at 54 participants. Mr. Shitima, welcome. Thank you for joining us. And we are really honored to have His Eminence Cardinal Abongo. And so I'm respectfully giving him the floor first for him to present to us the communique. You have the floor. Please unmute. Okay.
Merci beaucoup. Ça y est? On m'entend?
Oui.
OK, merci beaucoup. Ma communication d'aujourd'hui est intitulée tout simplement « Voyageons ensemble pour la justice climatique ». La crise climatique est une réalité quotidienne pour les populations d'Afrique. Les récentes vagues de chaleur estivale dans le nord du continent ont causé des pertes et des dommages sociaux et économiques massifs, battant des records de température et perturbant gravement le système agroalimentaire dans une région déjà affamée. Les tempêtes et les cyclones du début de l'année ont fait des ravages en Afrique australe et à Madagascar, entraînant la destruction des maisons et la perte de vies humaines. L'Afrique de l'Est est confrontée aujourd'hui à la pire crise alimentaire depuis une génération, participée par une sécheresse extrême. En Afrique de l'Ouest, les villes sont inondées, les communautés de littoraux sont submergées. Les conflits qui couvaient depuis des années s'intensifient maintenant en raison des déplacements climatiques. Où que l'on regarde sur ce continent africain, un continent déjà en difficulté en raison d'un système économique mondial injuste, on constate que les changements climatiques freinent le potentiel de développement. Il est parfois difficile de voir des solutions à cette situation complexe. Nous pouvons toutefois être certains de certaines choses. Par exemple, nous savons que les pays dits du Nord sont en grande partie responsables de la crise climatique et qu'ils doivent apporter leur juste contribution pour y remédier. Cela signifie qu'il faut montrer la voie en matière de réduction des émissions, financer l'adaptation au climat, les pertes et les dommages, et aider le pays dit du Sud à atteindre des niveaux de développement justes dans les limites de notre planète. Nous savons que les solutions les plus prometteuses reflèteront les principes clés de l'enseignement social catholique, tels que le bien commun, la justice sociale, la sauvegarde de notre maison commune et l'option préférentielle pour les pauvres. Nous connaissons également ce que les autres solutions ne devraient pas être. Les solutions à cette crise ne doivent pas poursuivre l'approche habituelle qui est à l'origine du problème et qui ne fera qu'enrichir les nations et les individus privilégiés aux dépens des plus démunis. Et pourtant, face à ces certitudes, il peut être encore difficile de comprendre les voies précises du changement. Dans sa dernière encyclique intitulée Fratelli Tutti, le pape François propose le dialogue et la rencontre comme moyen de construire un monde plus juste. C'est ce qui a inspiré les dialogues africains sur le climat, une série de conversations organisées par des acteurs de l'Église catholique et de la société civile en Afrique pour discuter, apprendre les uns des autres et identifier les principales priorités politiques avant la COP 27 en Égypte. Ces dialogues ont réuni des représentants de communautés et de la société civile vivant des conséquences du changement climatique, des chercheurs et des défenseurs professionnels ayant une expérience en matière de politique, des représentants de tous les niveaux de gouvernement et des leaders de l'Église catholique capables de formuler les questions éthiques urgentes soulevées par le changement climatique en termes d'action de Dieu et d'exigence de justice. Le changement climatique est un véritable scandale moral. Il s'agit d'un exemple tragique et frappant de péché dit structurel, selon l'enseignement de Saint Jean-Paul II dans son encyclique Solicitudo Rei Socialis au numéro 36. Facilité par une indifférence insensible et une avidité égoïste, la crise climatique conduit à la destruction de notre planète, à la dévastation de la vie de populations démunies et au préjudice des générations futures. Nous, chefs d'Église et organisations de la société civile d'Afrique et d'ailleurs, demandons aux dirigeants du monde, aux chefs d'entreprise et aux décideurs de tenir compte de ce communiqué et de ce fait, d'entendre le cri des plus vulnérables et le cri de la terre. Je vous remercie.
Thank you so much, Your Eminence, pointing out very important issues over there. The climate change is an example of structural sin. And so we've had a series of 5 dialogues around different policy issues, and we have just presented a communique. And now I'd like to welcome Mr. Ephraim Shitima. He is from Zambia, and he's going to be the first respondent to this particular communique that has just been presented by Cardinal Abongo, who is the Vice President of SECAM and the Archbishop of Kinshasa. And Mr. Ephraim Shitima is an expert on climate change policy formulation and implementation and an experienced negotiator under the UNFCCC. Mr. Shitima, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation to attend this important event. Let me thank His Eminence Cardinal has just issued that communique. I think from the African group of negotiators, we identify with most of the themes that His Eminence was outlining to us. As we move towards COP27, we also agree that it cannot be business as usual. We've emphasized that this COP has to be an implementation COP. And when we talk of implementation in the African context, is to address the real and significant challenges that the populations in Africa are facing. For example, His Eminence touched on justice, and we think that with a continent that has over 600 million people without access to electricity, and if we are to transition to green and clean energy sources, definitely that makes a good starting point to ensure that we can address both socioeconomic and climate challenges at the same time. We do have priorities that we hold dear and which we hope will be advancing at COP27, and most of these are reflected entirely in the communique. And so we find this a very important partnership with the church. Probably just a few points as I conclude, indicating the importance of not only the faith-based organizations, but the entire civil society organizations across the continent being involved as we move towards COP27. Because like His Eminence indicated, we shouldn't leave anyone behind. Societies and communities are the ones experiencing climate change. And so as we meet, although not everyone may be in the negotiating rooms, the presence of these civil society movements reminding us of the issues that are dear to the continent will be very important. And so just to conclude, we entirely support the communique that has just been issued, and we look forward to more engagements between now and even at COP27. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Shitima. We are really encouraged that the Africa Group of Negotiators agree with most of the themes within the communique. Thank you ever so much for that. And we also agree with you that it cannot be business as usual. And we are happy that most of the things that have been highlighted in the press, in the communique that has just been issued by His Eminence Cardinal Abongo, who will be leading the second delegation in COP27, that most of the issues that have been presented in the communique have also the Africa Group of Negotiators agree with them. We are really happy that about your emphasis on the importance of faith-based entities and the entire church of civil society, that they should be involved within the negotiations of COP, because they tend to bring a different dynamic and different dimension when they participate in policy dialogue. Thank you so much. I see there are some requests on the link to the final communication. This will be shared. So now I would like to welcome Tasneem Esop, who is the current Executive Director of CAN International. She is based in South Africa. Thank you, Tasneem. You have the floor. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Lucy, His Eminence, and greetings to everybody. Firstly, I'd really like to congratulate the Catholic Church and African civil societies for this important initiative ahead of COP27 being held on the African continent. African voices need to be heard in Sharm el-Sheikh. And this communique will be Africa's voice into Sharm el-Sheikh. And I do want to already acknowledge that the demands and the recommendations emerging out of the communique is very aligned to our network, a global network operating in over 130 countries in the world, and very much aligned with a coalition that we also support, the COP27 coalition. So it does appear as if the unity of voice, the consensus that we have built up between faith-based organizations, civil society, and other leaders is really important, because it's in that unity that we should be able to push for an outcome at COP27 that in fact talks to the priorities and needs, especially of those most vulnerable in Africa and around the world. I do want to comment about Laudato Si. I had the honor of being there ahead of the Paris COP when Laudato Si was released, and it was the most inspirational message that we received ahead of COP. That was nearly more than 5 years ago. And the world, unfortunately, not having listened to the inspiration that came out of Laudato Si, not having taken the voice of faith-based organizations and civil society seriously enough, we are witnessing that we have moved backwards instead of forwards. The trends emerging now, not just in terms of what's happening with the climate impacts being felt, and being felt far more sharply in the developing world and especially in Africa. But we have also seen trends that are really working against the very important theme of taking care of our common home and to act in the interest of the common good. We have seen this happening through the way rich nations dealt with the COVID pandemic, where they turned inwards, took care of their own needs, in the words of His Eminence and in the opening remarks, in a real display of selfish greed, where we did not take care of those who were suffering across the world, and we kept, rich nations kept the vaccine to themselves. And it is that same trend that we are witnessing with the dealing of climate change and climate impacts. As we speak right now, there is no funding for addressing loss and damage in the global south. There's no finance. Yes, of course, we have humanitarian aid. We see that, that goes, but there's no finance that's delivered through the multilateral system at all. And that's why we are so happy to hear that the communique addresses the demand to establish a climate loss and damage finance facility so that the funds can be provided to address the impacts that many, many of the poor and vulnerable are facing across the world, the ones who are least responsible for the climate crisis in the first place, and that is a fundamental injustice. So the demand for a loss and damage finance facility to address this injustice is critical at COP27. The issue of finance overall is an important issue. We know that rich nations did not deliver their obligation of 100 billion per annum by 2020. In fact, they apologized that they did not provide that finance. This is a huge injustice. Now, if you think about it, 100 billion in the context, for example, in sub-Saharan Africa, where we have $1 trillion in debt. And much of that debt is also being driven by the need to address the climate crisis. Now, that's another injustice. So when we talk about providing the scale of funding, and the Standing Committee on Finance in the UNFCCC just released a report that talks to a level of funding between 5.9 trillion to 11 trillion US dollars for just a few developing countries who have submitted their NDCs, as an example. Let's think about the scale of funding and your call in the communique to provide that funding through public finance. It has to be additional finance. It has to be predictable finance. It has to go to those who need it. So the issues of access to finance, especially by local communities, are all recommendations that we stand behind as CAN International as well. So let us go into Sharm el-Sheikh united in the demands for those who need climate justice, and especially in Africa. The poor and the vulnerable across the world need us to stand united for our common good, for our common home, and for climate justice. Thank you very much again for your communique, and we look forward to working with you in Sharm el-Sheikh at COP27.
Thank you so much, Tasneem. Very important points you have raised there. CAN International is a very important actor within this climate discourse, and we are really happy to have Tasneem here with us. She is the Executive Director of CAN, and she has mentioned very important issues. And one that always strikes me is that there is no funding to address loss and damage. When pastoralists are losing their livestock, when people lose their properties, when people lose whatever it is that they would have harvested, there is no funding to address this. She raises another issue that we are really passionate about as Caritas Africa, the issue on foreign debt and its management. Very important dimension over there. An aspect of the injustice and the need for climate finance. It should be additional. It should reach to the people who need it the most. Thank you so much for that. And thank you also for supporting the messages from the community. We really appreciate that. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We started with a word of prayer from Father Jermaine, who is from SECAM, and then His Eminence, Cardinal Abongo, presented a communique. We have just had responses from Mr. Ephraim Shitima, who is from the Africa Group of Negotiators, and then Tasneem has just responded to us right now. And now we will listen to our third respondent. Her name is Ineza Umuhoza Grace, and she is from the Loss and Damage Youth Coalition and a negotiator with the government of Rwanda. She is an eco-feminist and believes in the sustainability of the ecosystem and in the power of women to lead change. Welcome, Ineza, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. I just want to confirm if you can hear me. Okay, thank you. First of all, I'd like to also apologize myself because I won't be able to put on the camera because where I am right now is really early in the morning and my waking up face is not really that good. First, I want to thank the organizers for organizing such a great event at a really right time and for giving me the opportunity to be here because we are a few weeks away from COP to start, and this kind of event that brings up all of us together, actors, youth, faith, civil society, is important because we need to be reminded that even if we are going to be in the space where the COP is going to happen, we are carrying a sense of hope, a sense of comfort, and a sense of trust that we are taking from the community that we're working on a daily basis and be able to present it on this kind of important platform. So I'm coming from the Loss and Damage Youth Coalition, and we are a coalition of youth that started in 2020, and currently we have more than 400 members from more than 40 countries. And for us youth, we just like to focus on the sense of action that we need to come, especially in the climate action, because past climate inaction lead the world to be having what we are calling loss and damage, which is the negative impact of climate change. And we are the generation that is going to be left out with a lot of this, the burden of inaction is going to be on us. But we choose to not be on the blaming side, but we choose to be more on the action side, more on the side where we are calling for an active solution. And how we do it is also by shaping on how do we mean it to be actors. So first, for example, we are demanding for the loss and damage finance, which have been said, especially by our colleague from CAN International. So the finance that we are demanding need to be new and additional to the already existing one. And we don't want it to be in the same formality that we have seen in the past, because we are also aware that even the 100 billion goal that was set previously, this commitment was done without having any research. It was kind of a promise of the world to address climate action, but even that one has not been fulfilled. So if we are demanding the finance for loss and damage, we need this finance to be really taking into consideration of what is actually happening on the ground, really listening to how our community are facing when all like demonized or unjustified when we are having cyclone or drought or erosion, and also hearing on how women are being left out in terms of getting proper climate action in their context, and also listening to how youth, we are, I don't know how to say it, but it's terrifying. We are unable to see a future because everything is under the scope of climate change. And if climate change not being resolved, even if you're dreaming to be a farmer, you cannot have that dream, because everything's going to be trashed out by a 3-day rainfall or a 5-day rainfall. Even if you want to be in real estate, you cannot really dream of a big sustainable kind of a house, because everything's going to be destroyed with a cyclone or any kind of event. But what I love about faith, especially in the Bible and church, is because it calls us to believe in something as much as we can, even if we cannot see it. Because if we are believing in something that you cannot see it, you are driven to have that understanding of what are the action or what the items you have to put in place for that faith to be tangible, especially in our world. So for me, I believe that the loss and damage finance is going to be achievable. We are going to have it. So that is my crazy faith that I'm having. But I also know that there's some aspect that need to be in place in order for it to happen. So first, we need to come to the COP with an aligned voice, with the common demand, with the common ask. And the common ask is to have the finance for loss and damage. And what does that mean? It means that it needs to be in the language that will be speaking from those who have been facing this loss and damage since 1992. So those are the voices that need to be amplified so that they want to be heard. And in terms of action, so we need to also amplify the already existing action, because everything that our community have been facing, from drought for erosion, we have been developing a kind of adaptive mechanisms, but those mechanisms are not enough because the extent of impact are getting higher and higher. But that doesn't mean that we don't have a starting point. We just have a starting point where we can all act together as one. And then most importantly, we also need to give a space for youth to be active stakeholders, because in the past, youth been given space. Yes, youth are here, they listen to us, but they don't act. But this is the time to change, because youth need to be given the baton and they need to be the one to drive, because at the end of the day, we are going to be the one who are going to left with most of the injustice that we're facing today. And thank you so much.
Wow, absolutely inspirational message over there. And the take home is that we should have finance for loss and damage. Loss and damage comes from climate change, and we need to honor our commitments. My friend over there, Zan, says that it's a very apt message and justifiable, and that we need to start thinking beyond COP27 on how to ensure that these justifiable asks on loss and damage will be followed through for implementation. Thank you everyone for joining. I see a number of people, and we are 56 participants so far, and we have been listening to the respondents. We had a response from Mr. Shitima, from Tasnim, and then we had a response from Ineza. And before we move to the next part of the program, I would like to recognize the presence of Bishop Claudia Lorati, the Catholic Latin Bishop of Cairo and Alexandria. They will be our hosts over there. Distinguished guests, this has been an initiative of Catholic actors and different civil society organizations who held a series of dialogues, and it translated to a joint communique that His Eminence has just presented to us. And you have just been listening to the respondents. And now I'd like to welcome members of the press and my colleagues, different people who've joined from different networks. You now have the floor we now open the debate for you to respond. So please raise up your hand and I will give you the floor. What did we think of the communique? What would we want to find out more from the 5 themes of the dialogue around false solutions, around food systems and agriculture, around climate financing, around loss and damage, around climate-induced migration? Do we have any questions? Okay, Zan, welcome Zan, you have the floor.
Okay, so thank you very much, moderator. I would not use video. I just wanted to point to the last intervener who talked about ensuring that our language really resonates with the people on the ground and those who are directly affected. I think that's what gives us credibility. Ours is not about theory. It's not about making highfalutin statements, but about, really bringing to the table the real situations as we experience them on the ground. And I think that faith-based organizations are very critical in this because you can find them everywhere. In terms of my comment on the statement that I already put on the chat, But I just wanted to also talk about one other dimension, you know, the complexities of this situation that to so many things. Just one example in Ghana. Now, if you take my country, Ghana, you know, the agricultural sector is seriously impacted by climate change. Now, people have to survive. What is happening? Most of the young people are resorting to finding easy ways of digging the ground so they might find precious minerals, in this case, gold. So some of you may have heard the situation of the devastation, not just to the environment, but even to these young people who are digging everywhere. And because they are so vulnerable, people can easily conscript them and provide them with the equipment to keep, you know, destroying the land so that they will find alternative livelihood. I think this is a very dire situation. And those of you who have been following Ghana, you can see just this is one example of how when people's livelihood, you know, in the agricultural sector has been so seriously compromised, they resort to other ways of survival. And yes, we may say that they are creating this damage, but it's also a very desperate situation. And I just wanted to put that out and once again to complement the apt message and the justifiability of the demands that we are making. Kudos to this coalition of faith-based organizations, civil society, collaborative ministry is the way to go. Thank you, moderator. Back to you.
Thank you, Zan, for that inspirational intervention and for sharing with us the experience of Ghana. Do we have any other feedback? Sheila, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you very much for this very interesting and inspiring presentation. I'm with the Justice and Peace Commission with the USG/UISG. So my question is, how are you thinking of organizing, you know, the support with the Vatican and with other religious leaders around the world? And I think this is for Cardinal Amongo to kind of help us get a sense of direction of how we can work together. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila. She has directed the question to His Eminence Cardinal Amongo about how we are going to organize ourselves with the Vatican just to advance our agenda in the lead up to COP27. Your Eminence, you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup pour la question. Je crois que c'est une question capitale, la question de l'harmonisation de tout ce que nous faisons au niveau africain avec ce qui se fait au niveau central, c'est-à-dire au niveau du Saint-Siège. Au niveau de Rome, il y a le dicaster pour le développement humain qui prend en charge cette question. Mais comme vous le savez aussi, je ne suis pas seulement cardinal archevêque de Kinshasa, mais je suis aussi membre du conseil de 7 cardinaux autour du pape pour la réforme de l'Église. Et au sein de cette équipe, je m'occupe aussi de la question de justice et paix, notamment la question du climat. Et nous en parlons directement dans ces petits conseils autour du pape. Et lors du prochain COP27 en Égypte, il est prévu que moi-même j'y serai et je prendrai, je l'espère, la parole au nom de l'Église d'Afrique. Alors, c'est là que ça devient intéressant. Je travaille déjà avec le niveau universel, c'est-à-dire au niveau du Saint-Siège. Nous sommes déjà en collaboration. Ce que nous faisons actuellement au niveau africain, si nous arrivons aussi à enrichir ces communiqués, mettre d'autres éléments que nous estimons important à faire entendre au Caire, je crois que le temps qui nous reste est justement l'occasion d'étoffer notre stratégie parce que, bon, le Saint-Siège attend beaucoup de l'Église d'Afrique pour le COP27 du Caire. Donc, moi, je suis très heureux de participer à cet échange parce que ça pourrait vraiment nous aider à mettre ensemble nos préoccupations et de le porter de façon coordonnée à cette rencontre que je souhaite vraiment, comme quelqu'un l'a dit tout de suite dans les interventions, ça ne doit plus être une rencontre de théorie sur ce qu'on doit faire, mais le début d'un processus d'action pour aider les populations d'Afrique à vivre digne tout en préservant notre maison commune. Donc, je crois à notre niveau, le travail a déjà commencé et nous essayons d'aller au Caire avec le même message. Et si nous pouvons le faire avec l'ensemble des forces vives d'Afrique, notamment les organisations non gouvernementales, de la société civile, je crois que nous serons très forts. Merci.
Thank you very much, Your Eminence. We are happy to learn that you will be with us in COP27, and I know that you will be leading the delegation of SECAM. It is really encouraging, and we're also happy to see how this all links to the dicastery for the promotion of integral human development and also the justice and peace, and that you are in charge of climate issues. And this is really good because we know this message will continue towards COP and even post-COP and even within the synodal process that has been taking place in the church. It will be continued. It will continue. Thank you so much, Your Eminence. Anyone else with a question?
Yes. Can you hear me from Malta?
Yes.
I want to ask a question to the Cardinal, but I will ask it in French. Votre Éminence, je vous demande si vous êtes en contact avec les autres églises chrétiennes en Afrique, étant donné que l'Église catholique compte à peu près 23% des chrétiens, de 628 millions de chrétiens en Afrique. Est-ce que vous prévoyez une action conjointe? Il y a eu les déclarations récentes du Conseil mondial des églises et de la Lambeth Conference des anglicans qui ont beaucoup parlé de changement climatique. Merci.
Your microphone is off, Your Eminence.
It's on mute, okay.
Ça y est. Au niveau de l'Afrique, il y a déjà des initiatives d'harmonisation de nos points de vue au niveau de chaque pays. Si je prends l'exemple de mon pays, la République démocratique du Congo, il y a déjà une tradition de travailler ensemble avec les églises protestantes, les musulmans. Dans notre pays, nous avons notre plateforme de confession religieuse et nous traitons de toutes ces questions déjà au niveau du pays et au niveau de ce que nous appelons les conférences sous-régionales. Dans notre cas, c'est l'ACEAC qui prend par exemple le Congo, Rwanda, Burundi, et chaque sous-région a son organisation. Et à ce niveau aussi, il y a des réflexions qui se font entre l'Église catholique et les autres églises, pas seulement les autres églises, mais les autres confessions religieuses. Et je pense au point où nous en sommes, quand nous aurons à définir notre point de vue en tant qu'Église catholique, c'est-à-dire l'harmonisation de notre point de vue au niveau africain avec le niveau romain, nous aurons aussi à tenir compte de tous les éléments qui nous viennent des autres églises au niveau africain et des autres forces vives qui travaillent sur cette question. Donc, notre bureau à Accra travaille déjà dans cette perspective autour des questions de climat et de justice et de paix.
Thank you so much, Your Eminence, for that response on the importance of ecumenical cooperation and engaging with other Christian churches so that we continue to build momentum and buy-in for our advocacy agenda around climate change. So I also wanted to mention to you that we had about 5 people who were lined up over here just to respond to any questions that you may have. We have Ben Wilson from SCIAF, who was to respond to any issue to do with loss and damage. Julius Nkoma from CISONEC on climate finance, and Diego Martinez of CAFOD, who was to respond on issues to do with agriculture, food systems. Then we have Obrey Joe, who was to respond to issues on false solutions and the Congo Basin, and then Andrea Stocchiero from SINESA on climate-induced migration. So you may also, if you have any other technical questions around that, you have the floor. And maybe just to start with Diego, because I know him very well, it will be good for me to ambush him a little bit. And so Diego, how do you think African farmers, the voices of African farmers, will get to be heard at COP? What has been done to ensure that is going to happen?
Thanks, Lucy. Hi, everyone. Thanks for the inputs and presentations so far. It's good to see so many people today in the press conference. So as Lucy said, one of the dialogues that we organized was on food systems and agriculture. Our outcome was very clear. We had around 70 people in a dialogue who shared their experiences and collective inputs on what they want to see from COP27, specifically in agriculture. Maybe just to give a bit of context before responding to the question that Lucy made, this COP is going to be key for agricultural and land decisions under the UNFCCC. With the Corneve joint work on agriculture coming to an end, and the COP expected to make a decision on its continuation. So really, a lot of the discussion we had in this dialogue was about the type of governance systems and continuation that we want to see under the UNFCCC when it comes to agriculture, which is an issue that hasn't been dealt with traditionally under the UNFCCC. Among the common, the collective kind of responses that we got during the dialogue, there was a clear message that we wanted a stronger focus on smallholder farmers, both in terms of policy focus, inclusion of smallholder farmers, indigenous people, and especially women farmers, as they make up the majority of smallholder farmers and food producers in the Global South, to be part of those discussions. And the way we see, just going to your question, Lucy, the way we see, based on the discussions, the inclusion of smallholder farmers and marginalized people is for them to be sitting at the table during COP and afterwards when a new governance system is created as a follow-up of COP27. We want farmers, smallholder farmers and networks from the Global South to be part of the process, and then also at national level when decisions are turning to national policies, climate policies. So that was very clear. I mean, you can see other elements in the communique, but this was a very clear point that came out from the dialogue, the role of smallholder farmers, indigenous people and women. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much, Diego, and good to see you. And so I wanted to welcome Obrey Joe Maimoni just to ask a question around false solutions. How do you think civil society can counteract this issue to do with false solutions as we go to COP? How can we counteract that?
Thank you very much, comrades. Yeah, the discussion around false solution is a very critical one. because globally, the number of calls that we have experienced over the years marred with a lot of deceptive feedback, a lot of deceptive solutions, which we term as the four solutions. Those four solutions, majority of those four solutions, they're actually speaking the same languages, but they are actually differentiated with the name they call them, but they're actually speaking the same language. And this COP holding in Africa, many people attempted to call it an Africa COP, but openly I am saying it's not an African COP. It is a COP holding in Africa, and it is going to be shameful if this COP turns out to be like the previous COPs. It's going to be shameful if this COP comes out with the same terminologies that are being used as the real climate solutions. We gathered together in July to unmask so many false solutions that are being used at the Conference of Parties. This COP27, civil society are going to be, we know COP27 is going to be a bit difficult space for civil society to organize, but we are going to try our best to make sure that we are firm with our decisions. We are firm in making sure that the solutions that are discussed are real solutions. The solutions that are discussed are solutions that will be speaking towards the phase out of fossil fuel and gas. This time, because of the Russia war against Ukraine, there is a gas push in Africa. And at this point, at this COP, we are going to push that gas back to those that want to push it on Africa. Africa don't need gas to develop. Africa don't need oil to develop. This is another deception that is also coming to African government, that without oil and gas, they won't develop. Africa will develop without oil and gas. We need to come back and start thinking on how to bring agroecology as a solution to addressing climate crisis. We need to start speaking on how to migrate to 100% renewable energy that is community driven. These are some of the things that we are going to be speaking for during the COP27. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that passionate intervention. And we hope that this COP will actually shift the dynamics and we can start seeing a difference based on this issue on four solutions. Let's work towards concrete recommendations to see that Africa can develop and we do not have the bottom 40% remaining at the same place. We can see how to engage in this dialogue and develop. And then I wanted to welcome Ben Wilson because he has been doing some good work around loss and damage with different partners and different actors. And within this, the Africa Climate Dialogue Steering Committee, there was a particular dialogue focusing on loss and damage. And so I just wanted to ask Ben to tell us what is the one thing that they would like to see, he would like to see at the end of COP when it comes to loss and damage. What is the particular one issue that we want to see at the end of COP?
Sure, thank you so much, Lucy. Let me just quickly say, I've shared a document in the chat which puts the issue of loss and damage into the terminology of Catholic social teaching, and I think that that is vital because what that piece of work did was really reflect on why this issue is so important to us as Catholic actors across the world. In terms of the one thing we want to see, well, maybe I can just say two things that are in the communique. Number one is recognition of loss and damage as a third pillar of action under the Convention and the Paris Agreement. And that is alongside adaptation and mitigation, we need to see loss and damage. The fact that it has not been recognized as that before draws from a position of privilege, which global North countries have in the negotiations because they are not facing loss and damage to the same extent. So therefore, they have been avoiding their complicity in the crisis by not recognizing loss and damage. So we need recognition. And secondly, we need finance. The conversations around finance for loss and damage gained a lot of momentum at COP26. That momentum has stayed and will come back at COP27. Tasneem has said that loss and damage is a litmus test for success at COP27, and that language has been reiterated recently by Antonio Gutierrez. And I would really call on all Catholic actors across the world and across Africa to really raise our voices collectively on this issue of loss and damage at COP27. Thank you, Lucy.
Thank you so much, Ben. And so, Julius, where should the money go? If you're talking about climate finance and there's a basket of funding coming from somewhere, where should the money go?
Yeah, thank you for the recognizing me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm gonna put off my video. I hope that's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, we are coming from a history of false promises and commitments in terms of climate finance, and I think that has been reiterated in the discussion that we had on climate finance during the session, and I think there were a lot of interventions from different stakeholders. I've been also keenly listening to what the different interventions that have been put forward here, including from the His Eminent, which is actually highlighting the fact that we need finance to actually go to the grassroots and support the local communities to actually implement locally led adaptation initiatives. So one of the key things that was actually elaborated in the communique in terms of finance is the issue of provision of new, accessible, and adequate, predictable, but also additional climate finance. We understand that there's a lot of talk about climate finance. Countries are talking about providing climate finance, but really it's not additional, it's not new, it's not coming out very clearly. We cannot even define it, whether this is climate finance or ODA. So one of the causes is to continue push at the COP27 that we need to have that clear definition of climate finance, and then clear mechanisms of transparency, and accountability of this climate finance. So it really needs to go to the ground and support those local communities that are suffering the impacts of climate change. But also, as we move forward to COP27, there was a lot of talk about ensuring that we need to make sure that the new collective and quantified goal on climate finance has to be defined right now, and clear mechanisms should be put forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Julius. And so the last question, I will direct it to Andreas Tokiero. Any thoughts around climate-induced migration as we go to COP?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Lucy. Do you hear me? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I think that it was very interesting to have a dialogue specifically on climate-induced migration and displacement, because, I live in Italy, and we have a sort of distorted vision about migration, in the sense that we have an Eurocentric vision, and we see all migration problems according to our public opinion views or political views and so on. So it's really important to have a more universal vision, and in this case, an African vision about migration, and particularly the linkages between climate change, migration, and displacement, in order to change also our ideas, and to find and to support a really dialogue between Africa and Europe, for example, in order to change our policies. And and so for me specifically, it was very interesting for this reason. And it was also interesting to hear about the stories about migration in Africa caused by climate change. Climate has a strong impact on local population, disasters, long-term effects of climate change on land, agriculture, in the cities, and there are increasing forced movements inside Africa, inside the countries, transboundary movements between the countries. And in this sense, we have identified some messages that you find in the communication. And particularly, I would like to concentrate on four messages. The first is that climate-induced migration displacement should be more analyzed and more shared in COP27, because it's really important in Africa, but also in other continents. And this is linked to the need to give more importance to climate-induced migration in the loss and damages chapter of the United Nations Conference on Climate Change. And in this sense, the need to increase the finance for loss and damages, and the finance to support movements of people, forced movement of peoples induced by climate change inside the countries and between the countries in Africa. And another point is that if we need the finance, we need also new migration policies. African countries are speaking about free movements of people, and the migration-induced migration should be seen as an adaptation measures that local population needs in order to respond to climate change disasters and long-term effects. And finally, another important question is to give protection to these movements, to give protection and to give the opportunities to have a good inclusion in the new territories that these peoples are looking for, sharing common resources with the local population. And you know that it's not easy to find a solution between local hosting population and migrants coming from other territories. So there is the need for local policies to share common goods and to find solutions that respond to the needs of local population, and in the same time also to refugees and climate-induced migration from other territories. It's not an easy task, and we heard in the dialogue, for example, good measures implemented in Uganda by Caritas and by other civil society organizations. So there is also the capacity, and also in this case, there is the need to support this capacity and to finance this capacity to give a dignified life to all the people looking for a better future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrea. And that marks the end of the press conference that we had today to issue the communique from the 5 dialogues from the Africa Climate Dialogue Series. Your Eminence, thank you so much for staying with us, for responding to the questions, and for issuing the communique. And we look forward to engage with you in the lead up to COP27 and also during your participation as you lead the second delegation at COP27. We thank so much the Bishop of Cairo and Alexandria for joining us today. We thank so much Tasneem, Ineza, and Mr. Shitima for responding, and also the 5 experts who've responded to our questions right now. We thank everybody who worked behind the scene, the communication team, the likes of Lydia, and every other person who did a lot of work to put all this together. Thank you so much. It has been really interesting for us to participate in this process and to learn and to dialogue with each other and to make new friends within this climate discourse. Thank you ever so much. God bless you and have a lovely week. Bye from me.
Thank you. Thanks.